Before that moment at the traffic light, my life had already started coming apart at the seams. The warning signs were there, scattered like puzzle pieces I had stubbornly refused to put together. Isabel had been pulling away for months. Her laughter dulled, her touch distant. I convinced myself it was just stress, maybe exhaustion, or just the kind of monotony that creeps in after years together. I didn't want to admit there was something deeper at play. The first real slap in the face came 2 weeks earlier when Isabel completely forgot our anniversary. In nearly 20 years, she had never let it slip past. We were never the type for flashy gifts or grand celebrations, but we always acknowledged it. Small gestures, a shared memory, something to mark the day. But this time, nothing. Not a single word. When I finally brought it up, she blinked at me, genuinely confused, like she had no clue what day it was. That should have been my wake-up call, the moment I started digging for the truth, but I let it slide. Then there was the phone. Isabel had never been secretive with her devices before, but lately, it was practically an extension of her hand. She used to leave it charging in the kitchen, toss it on the nightstand without a second thought. Now, she carried it everywhere, clutched in her palm, tucked in her pocket, even slipped under her pillow at night. When I casually asked about it, she just laughed, brushed it off, said work had been crazy and she needed to stay on top of things. Seemed reasonable, but the way her eyes darted away told a different story. A week before everything unraveled, I ran into Natalie, one of Isabel's coworkers, at the grocery store. She had always been polite, friendly, but not the talkative type. That day, though, something was off. She hesitated before greeting me, her smile stiff, forced. "Hey, Liam," she said, shifting uncomfortably. "How's everything going?" There was something in her voice, an edge of discomfort, like she knew something I didn't. The conversation was brief, but it left a sour taste in my mouth. 3 nights before that red light moment, Isabel came home ridiculously late, way past her usual time. I had been waiting, pretending to scroll through my phone, but really, I was just listening for the sound of her car. When she finally walked in, she barely even looked at me. "Long day," she muttered before disappearing upstairs to take a shower. Normally, she'd collapse onto the couch, kick off her heels, and unload about some office drama. But not that night. That night, she vanished without another word, like I wasn't even there. That should have been the moment I confronted her, asked her outright where she had been, who she was with. But I didn't. Maybe I didn't want to hear the answer. Maybe, deep down, I already knew. Either way, I chose denial. And the thing about denial? It doesn't save you. It only delays the inevitable. I learned that lesson the hard way. That day, it wasn't even my fault. I was just minding my own business, waiting at a red light, when the driver next to me motioned for me to roll down my window. His face was mostly hidden behind dark sunglasses, one arm hanging lazily over his door. "Hey, your tire's going flat," he said. My gut tensed. I glanced at my dashboard, no warning lights. Still, something about the way he said it put me on edge. But better safe than sorry, right? I nodded, pulled into a nearby parking lot, and stepped out. Damn it. A screw was lodged deep in the tread, air hissing out in a slow, steady leak. Just perfect. With no real choice, I headed into the store to grab a can of sealant. Back outside, I hesitated before doing something completely stupid. I yanked the screw out. The air rushed out fast, way faster than I expected. Panicking, I shoved it back in, hoping it would slow the leak. I managed to get enough air in at a gas station and prayed it would hold long enough to get me home. 5 miles from the house, I checked my mirror. The tire was sagging again. Frustrated, I pulled into a convenience store, hoping to find an air pump. No luck. With no other option, I twisted the sealant in place and squeezed. Green slime oozed out, but at least the hissing stopped. Just as I was about to get back in my car, I heard an engine. A massive lifted pickup truck rumbled into the lot. Something about it nagged at me, like I'd seen it before but couldn't quite place it. The driver's side door swung open, and out stepped a guy who looked like he'd just strutted out of a damn rodeo. Tall, blonde, jeans, cowboy boots, and a belt buckle the size of a dinner plate. I might have laughed, until the passenger door opened. She stepped out. Long black hair, effortless confidence, moving like she owned the ground she walked on. Isabel. My wife. What the hell? Neither of them noticed me. My work car was small, unremarkable, easy to miss. I stood there, frozen, as they strolled hand in hand into the store, her laughter ringing through the air like a slap to the face. My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe. It felt like someone had driven their fist straight into my gut. And I just stood there, watching like some pathetic fool. Then it clicked. That truck. I had seen it before. Parked outside the psychiatric clinic where Isabel worked. And now I had a name. Marcus Reed. A social worker at the clinic. Why wasn't Isabel at work? I needed answers. Minutes later, they walked out, coffee cups in hand, lost in their own little world. He opened the truck door for her, helped her in like some damn gentleman, then climbed in himself. I followed. Not to a hotel. Not to a bar. To my house. I watched as Marcus pulled into my garage. Before I could even process what was happening, the door slid shut, cutting me off. My knuckles turned white around the steering wheel. My mind spun, refusing to believe what I was seeing. I sat there, stunned, until reality snapped me back. My tire was still holding air. For now. 2 hours later, the garage door opened. They drove off. I grabbed a file from my passenger seat, pretending to read. She wouldn't have noticed me if I'd been right in front of her. She was too busy leaning into him, flashing a smile I hadn't seen in years, the kind that used to be mine. Isabel wasn't supposed to be home until 5. It was barely 2. That meant I had time. Just enough. I had to go inside. I needed proof. The house was eerily quiet. The slow drip from Sophie's bathroom faucet, the one I'd meant to fix for weeks, was the only sound. The air conditioning hummed, sending a chill over my skin, but inside, I was burning up. Nothing seemed out of place. Upstairs, the bed was neatly made. Fresh sheets. My stomach twisted. I sank to the floor, back against the wall, hollowed out by what I already knew. For half an hour, I just sat there, my mind refusing to catch up with reality. It felt surreal, like I had wandered into a nightmare. My stomach turned, and I forced myself up, dragging my body to the bathroom. Cold water on my face helped, until I saw the wet shower floor. They had been here. Together. I staggered back, my pulse thundering. My gaze snapped back to the bed. This wasn't just my bedroom anymore. It was a crime scene. I didn't know what my next move was. Well, that wasn't entirely true. I was divorcing Isabel. That much was certain. But beyond that, I was lost. No lawyer, no plan. And despite everything, I still had to pick up Sophie from school. Sophie. What the hell was I supposed to tell her? I drove in a daze, my body heavy, my head throbbing. I probably looked like hell, but none of that mattered. I couldn't leave Sophie waiting. She was the only person left I could trust. I spotted her instantly near the school entrance, the late afternoon sun catching the dark waves of her hair. She looked so much like Isabel, same olive skin, same deep brown hair, but her eyes were uniquely hers. Hazel, shifting between gold and green. I had never seen another pair like them. She slid into the front seat, tossing her backpack in the back. She turned to greet me but stopped short, her sharp eyes scanning my face. "Dad, what happened?" she asked, her voice careful but firm. "You look sick. Is something wrong? Is Mom okay?" I had to say something. "I'm fine, kitten," I lied, forcing a smile. "No one's hurt. No one's sick. But we need to talk." Her frown deepened. I took a breath. "Sophie, let's go to the park first. Just let me hold you for a minute, okay? No questions until we get there." She hesitated. "Okay, but you're scaring me." "I know," I admitted. "But I promise we'll be okay." I just hoped I wasn't lying. The 5-minute drive stretched into an eternity. This park held years of memories, pushing her on swings, watching her play, believing we were a happy family. But had my whole life been a lie? As we walked toward an old bench, Sophie slipped her hand into mine, a childhood habit she had never quite outgrown. Such a small gesture, but it hit me like a wrecking ball. We sat. "Just tell me, Dad," she said softly. "I can take it." I let out a shaky breath. "I don't know if I can." And then I broke. The words tumbled out, what I had seen, how it felt, how the ground had tilted under me. My voice cracked. Tears burned down my face. But she never let go of my hand. When I finally fell silent, she leaned into me, resting her head on my shoulder. "That's really bad, Dad," she whispered. "But we need to talk to Mom. It looks awful, but we don't know everything yet. We need the truth." I kissed the top of her head, my chest tight with pride. She was braver than I was. She tugged my hand. "Come on. Want to drive?" I asked. For a second, her eyes lit up. She had just gotten her learner's permit. Then reality set in. Her excitement faded, and she nodded. She drove carefully, every move precise, gripping the wheel a little too tight. When we pulled into the driveway, Isabel's car was already in the garage. She was home. Isabel greeted us at the door with a smile like nothing had changed. Like she wasn't a liar, a cheater, a fraud. Hey, you too. Feel like takeout tonight? My treat. Sophie didn't hesitate. Actually, we need to talk. Isabel's smile flickered, just for a second. Oh, okay. Is everything all right, sweetheart? Sophie's face was unreadable. I don't know. Let's find out. We moved to the living room. Sophie and I sat together on the couch while Isabel settled into that stupid overpriced armchair she had insisted on buying. She glanced between us. What's going on? I folded my arms. How was your day? She tilted her head slightly. Busy at the office. One of the reps brought lunch. Why? So you were at work all day? Sophie asked, her voice perfectly even. Isabel's eyes sharpened. Yes. Why? I leaned forward. You weren't at the house this afternoon with Marcus Reed? The color drained from her face. What? She forced a laugh, but it was weak. Of course not. Are you accusing me of something, Liam? I saw you. Her mouth opened. Then shut. Then... No, you didn't. You must be mistaken. She turned to Sophie. Sweetheart, he's confused. I was at work all day. You can ask Laura. Sophie's voice was like steel. No, I won't ask Laura. She'd cover for you. But I could ask Patrick Whitman. He's your boss, right? What's his number? Isabel's face darkened. He worked the night shift. He's probably sleeping. Her arms crossed tightly. Is this a setup? What do you think I did? I think you trapped yourself, I said. And we both know you're lying. Why? Her mind raced, but not fast enough. Fine, she finally snapped. I was home. But this? This is why I didn't tell you. I knew you'd jump to conclusions. No one accused you of anything, Sophie shot back. But now I am. You made Dad look crazy to protect yourself. Why? What are you hiding? Are you having an affair with Marcus? Isabel flinched. You don't even know him, she muttered. Sophie's eyes narrowed. Then why did you call him an idiot just now? Isabel froze. Sophie pressed harder. I've met him twice. He creeps me out. But that's not the point. Answer the question. Are you having an affair with him? Isabel's gaze darted between us, searching for an escape. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I didn't want it to come out like this. Sophie's voice was sharp, cold. Come out how? Isabel let out a slow breath, like she was preparing herself for some grand confession. I love him, she said, turning to me with a pleading look. I'm sorry, Liam. I never wanted things to end up this way. We worked together every day, and over time, I don't know. He just became someone I connected with. Like a missing part of me I didn't realize was gone. I barely registered her words before she kept going. I was going to tell you. I just needed the right moment. Once we both finalize our divorces, Marcus and I are getting married. I wish you hadn't found out like this, but I promise everything will be okay. She turned to Sophie, attempting a reassuring smile. You'll still see your dad. Marcus has a gorgeous house on the lake, and he has a daughter too. He's really excited to meet you, and I think we're all going to be happy together. Sophie shot up from her seat. Are you out of your damn mind? Her voice trembled with fury. I'm not living with that creep. He looks at me like I'm something to chew up and spit out. Her eyes narrowed. And you're right. I will see Dad whenever I want. Because I'm staying with him. The one I won't be seeing is you. Isabel opened her mouth, but Sophie didn't wait for an answer. She turned on her heel and stormed upstairs. A second later, her bedroom door slammed, the lock clicking into place. Isabel exhaled, shaking her head like Sophie was just being dramatic. She'll get used to it, she said with forced calm. Marcus is a good man, Liam. When you get to know him, you'll understand. I know this is hard, but I have to do what makes me happy. And Marcus makes me happy. She shrugged, as if that was all the justification she needed. I stared at her, and for the first time, I didn't recognize the woman in front of me. She had Isabel's face, Isabel's voice, but the woman I had married would never have been this cold, this selfish. Whatever you say, Isabel. My voice was flat, empty. So when are you leaving? Her brows knit together. Leaving. She laughed like I had just said something ridiculous. Why would I leave? Marcus is still legally married, so we need to sort things out before making any major moves. No, I met her eyes, unyielding. You're leaving. You have 3 days. Her expression flickered with disbelief before hardening. You can't just kick me out, Liam. This is my house too. If anyone should be leaving, it's you. I let out a slow breath, keeping my voice level. I think you're forgetting something. I bought this house before we ever got married. My name is the only one on the deed. So legally, this house belongs to me. Not us. Just me. A flash of panic crossed her face. And where exactly am I supposed to go? You're really going to throw me out like I'm nothing? I shrugged. Not my problem. Maybe find one of those cheap motels where people like you do their dirty work. Her lips trembled. That's cruel, Liam. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't choose this. I didn't mean to fall for Marcus. It just happened. A dry, humorless laugh escaped me. Oh, so you just tripped and fell in love? Like some idiot running with scissors and stabbing himself in the eye? That's funny, because I don't remember marriage vows including a whoops, my bad clause. Her face twisted with irritation. You don't have to be sarcastic. Why can't you just accept that I love Marcus? I tilted my head. Maybe because this morning, before I left for work, you told me you loved me. And now, hours later, you're saying it's him? Call me crazy, but that's a little hard to believe. Her voice softened, trying to sound sincere. I do love you, Liam. I always have. But I'm in love with Marcus. Oh, I get it now, I said, voice dripping with mock understanding. So for the last 18 years, you've been lying to my face? Good to know. She reached for my hand. We were in love once. I yanked my hand away. You have 3 days, Isabel. If you're not out by then, I'll have the sheriff here to remove your things. Her eyes welled up. Please, Liam. We can still be friends. Marcus even wants to be friends with you. I scoffed, shaking my head. She pushed forward, desperate now. We have to think about Sophie. No matter what happens, she needs both of us. Something inside me shifted. The sadness, the heartbreak, it all burned away, leaving behind something colder. You must be out of your mind, I said, my voice low and steady. Friends? With you? With him? That's never happening. She winced like I had slapped her, but I wasn't done. Tell Marcus to stay the hell away from me. And as for you, you're nothing to me now. You have 3 days. After that, I never want to see your face again. First thing in the morning, I'm calling a lawyer. You'll get your divorce faster than you expected. I turned and walked away. She followed, still trying to reason with me, rambling about maturity and handling things peacefully. I ignored her, heading straight to the bedroom. I yanked her clothes from the closet and dumped them in the spare room. She hovered behind me, her voice trailing off as she realized I wasn't going to argue anymore. Eventually, she fell silent and started sorting through her belongings. The second she was distracted, I slipped out and locked the door behind me. Minutes later, my phone buzzed. Sophie, you okay, Dad? Me. Yeah, kitten. You? Sophie, not really. But I'll be okay. Me. I love you. Let me know if you need anything. Sophie, can you take me to school tomorrow? I don't want to ride with her. Me, of course. I collapsed onto the bed, but barely slept. My mind spun, running through 1,000 different thoughts, but none of them led anywhere. At some point, exhaustion won, and I drifted into a restless sleep. The alarm yanked me back into reality. My first thought was that everything from the night before had been a dream. Then I remembered. Dragging myself into the shower, I let the scalding water burn away the fog. Once dressed, I called my boss. I need a few days off, I said bluntly. I'm filing for divorce. He didn't ask questions, just told me to take whatever time I needed. I brewed coffee, sat at the kitchen table in silence, and eventually made breakfast for Sophie and me. She came downstairs, tired but steady, and ate quietly. A few minutes later, Isabel appeared, pretending like nothing had changed. She poured herself coffee and tried to make small talk. Neither of us responded. When breakfast was over, I grabbed my keys. Time to go. Isabel turned to Sophie. Are you ready? Sophie didn't even look at her. She just turned to me. Are you ready, Dad? I nodded. She grabbed her backpack, and without another word, we walked out the door. Isabel sighed. Fine. Act like children if that makes you feel better. We ignored her. She didn't exist anymore. She let out an exaggerated sigh, snatched up her purse, and stomped out the door. I didn't bother watching her go. As far as I was concerned, she was already gone. Dropping Sophie off at school felt like peeling off another layer of myself. She hesitated before getting out, then leaned over and pressed a quick kiss to my cheek. Such a small thing, but it grounded me, anchored me when everything else felt like it was crumbling. I watched her disappear through the doors, then gripped the steering wheel and exhaled sharply. My mind was a storm, thoughts colliding too fast to hold on to. Eric. I needed to call Eric. He'd been through this kind of hell before. Maybe he had some advice. I scrolled through my contacts, found his name, and hit dial. He picked up almost immediately. Hey man, what's up? I need a lawyer. A long pause. Then a sigh. Damn. You okay? Not even close, I admitted. Who handled your divorce? Not mine, Eric said without hesitation. Use my ex's lawyer. She wiped the floor with me. You want results? Go with her. Perfect. He gave me the name, and I called the firm immediately. A receptionist put me on hold before I could get through my first sentence. When she came back, I laid everything out. By the time we were done, I had an afternoon consultation booked. That gave me a few hours to make some preemptive moves. Isabel and I had shared investments I couldn't touch yet, but I sure as hell wasn't about to let her drain everything while she played house with Marcus. First step, slashing our credit card limits down to $500. If she wanted to start her fantasy life, she wasn't doing it on my dime. Victoria Lawson, divorce attorney, was a sharp woman who didn't waste time. But the second I sat down in her office, she arched a brow. Leaving your wife for someone younger? I blinked. Not even close. She's the one who cheated, with a married coworker, no less. And now they're planning their happily ever after. She studied me for a second, then gave a small nod. Apologies. I don't represent cheaters. If I did, I wouldn't sleep at night. Well, lucky for both of us, she's the guilty one. Her demeanor shifted into business mode. What do you want out of this? My daughter, I said without hesitation. She's my priority. Can I get full custody? Lawson folded her hands on the desk. Legally, both parents are considered equal, but in practice, courts still favor the mother, especially with daughters. How old is she? Does she want to live with you? She's 15. And yes, she's made it very clear she wants to stay with me. That got a nod of approval. That helps. Kids over 14 have significant input in custody rulings, and judges usually honor their wishes. If she were younger, it would be a tougher battle. But with her age and her preference, I don't see an issue. I met her gaze. Good. Make it happen. She nodded. And just like that, the wheels were in motion. On the drive home, my mind shifted gears. This wasn't just about surviving the divorce. It was about controlling the narrative. Isabel and Marcus weren't going to paint me as the villain in their little love story. First, Marcus's wife. She deserved to know the truth, just like I had. Second, Isabel's parents. They had always treated me like family, and they adored Sophie. But telling them the news would take tact. Your daughter is a lying, cheating snake wasn't the best approach. Third, mutual friends. I wasn't going to let Isabel spin this her way. People needed to know the facts, and I had no problem delivering them. Social media seemed like a good place to start. Isabel had always managed our shared Facebook account, but I knew my way around the settings. A quick password reset, and I was in. Then I searched for Marcus's wife. She had an account. Perfect. I took screenshots, pictures of Isabel and Marcus looking way too cozy. Then I typed out a short, brutally honest post on Isabel's page. Isabel and I are divorcing. She has found her true love in Marcus. I attached the photos, posted it, changed the password, and logged out. And then, I waited. I hadn't expected immediate fallout, but I didn't have to wait long. At 2:07 p.m., Isabel's name flashed across my screen. I answered. You unbelievable asshole, she hissed. You just couldn't let this go, could you? Her anger was music to my ears. You blocked me? Take the post down. Liam, she snapped. Marcus's wife doesn't know yet. My parents are freaking out. My friends won't stop calling. You're making this worse than it needs to be. I didn't hesitate. No. Her voice turned sharp. What are you, a child? Take it down. I smirked. You should be grateful, Isabel. Now you don't have to hide. Everyone gets to celebrate your love story. She exhaled sharply. Are you trying to humiliate me? I laughed. Oh, so you're embarrassed? You don't like people knowing what you did? That's rich. Silence. For a moment, I thought she had hung up. Then, softer, she murmured, Liam, it wasn't supposed to happen like this. A fresh wave of bitterness rolled through me. You lost the right to decide how this played out the second you made your choice. You don't get sympathy. You don't get kindness. You don't even get basic courtesy anymore. You're nothing to me now, Isabel. Get used to it. I ended the call. Seconds later, my phone rang again. I didn't even look at the screen before silencing it. I had more important things to do. It was time to pick up Sophie. On the way home, I told her about my meeting with Victoria Lawson. She seemed relieved to hear that she wouldn't have to fight to stay with me. But something still weighed on her mind. What's wrong? I asked. She frowned. staring out the window. What's wrong with her, Dad? I glanced over. Who? Victoria? No. Mom. She shook her head. I love her. I really do, but she's always been off. Like she never really grew up. Not like you. It always felt like you were raising two kids, her and me. Did you ever notice that? I hesitated, then sighed. Not in those exact words. But yeah, she's always been impulsive. I just never thought she'd do something like this. Sophie's expression darkened. Guess we'll just have to deal with it. Then, after a beat, her voice turned sharp. Dad, I never want to be alone in a house with that fool. Ever. I didn't care what it took. I just knew I'd never let that happen. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. I promise, Sophie. He'll never get the chance. We grabbed pizza on the way home, but I'd barely started my second slice when my phone rang. The name flashing on the screen made my stomach sink. George. Isabel's dad. Sophie caught my expression. It's Grandpa, I muttered. She sat up straighter. Put it on speaker. I did. George's voice was steady but heavy. Liam, Isabel showed up last night. Said she needed a place to stay. Want to tell me what's going on? I kept my voice calm. Did you ask her? She said you threw her out. I did. Silence. Then, and why is that? I exhaled slowly. She's having an affair with Marcus Reed. They had this whole plan. He'd divorce his wife. She'd divorce me. And they'd live happily ever after. George didn't speak right away. When he did, his voice was strained. What? I saw them. And she admitted it. Another pause, then. Are you absolutely sure? Sophie jumped in. Grandpa, it's me. I was there. I heard everything. I'm so sorry. Her voice cracked. I love you. George's voice softened. Don't cry, love bug. Stay strong, all right? We love you. We'll talk to your mom. A moment passed before he sighed. Liam, are you still there? I'm here. I don't even know what to say, he admitted. I'm sorry, son. I steadied myself. Just know nothing changes for Sophie. You and your wife will always be her grandparents. And I get that you love Isabel. You have to do what you have to do. I just hope you won't end up hating me. That'll never happen, he said firmly. I'll get to the bottom of this. Call me if you need anything. That went better than expected. The divorce itself was a mess, but anyone who's been through one knows how ugly it gets. Isabel somehow convinced herself she had a shot at custody. She didn't. Victoria Lawson made sure of that. The judge awarded me full custody, citing Sophie's age and clear preference. Isabel got visitation on one condition. Sophie could never be alone with her and Marcus. Not that it mattered. Turns out, Marcus wasn't quite the soulmate Isabel had envisioned. His wife divorced him, and within 2 weeks, he was off with someone else. So much for destiny. Isabel's grand plan had collapsed. 7 months in, she hit me with something I didn't see coming. She requested marriage counseling. The judge granted it. 8 to 10 sessions. Our assigned therapist, Mr. Holloway, looked like he spent his weekends at drum circles. Long gray ponytail, wire-rimmed glasses, the whole retired hippie aesthetic. At the first session, he asked us to state our goals. Isabel went first. I want to focus on self-discovery, happiness, and what the universe has planned for me. I barely stopped myself from rolling my eyes. Then Holloway turned to me. Mr. Bennett, what are your goals for these sessions? I leaned back. To get through them. Holloway frowned. Don't you think it's important to work through the issues that led to this? I smiled, but there was no humor in it. See, that's the thing. I didn't create this situation, Mr. Holloway. And I'm fine with my own issues. I plan to keep them. Isabel gasped. Holloway looked scandalized. Liam, how are we supposed to fix things if you won't even discuss them? She demanded. I shrugged. Not my problem. Holloway cleared his throat. You do realize if I report to the judge that you're refusing to cooperate, you could be held in contempt? I smirked. You mean if you lie? These sessions are recorded, right? I'm here. I'm answering questions. That's cooperation. Holloway's face reddened. I believe the judge expected effort. I kept my tone light. I'm not responsible for the judge's expectations, just my own. Holloway assigned homework, forced time together outside of sessions. Isabel saw it as a chance to wear me down. One evening, she asked, Liam, what would it take for you to drop the divorce and actually try? I didn't look up. An act of God. She waited. When I didn't elaborate, she pressed. What do you mean? I met her eyes. Unless you can turn back time and erase Marcus from existence, that would do it. Other than that, only God has that power. I tilted my head. You develop any supernatural abilities, Isabel? other than attracting married men? She never asked again. The sessions dragged on pointless, repetitive. Eventually, mercifully, they ended. The judge looked between us. Have you made any progress? Victoria Lawson didn't hesitate. Your Honor, my client has no interest in reconciliation. We request the divorce be finalized immediately. The judge agreed. 10 days later, the paperwork arrived. It was done. Sophie still saw her mom, spent time with her grandparents. Isabel planned outings, and Sophie went, but something had shifted. It wasn't the same. Her world had changed, and I was grateful to be part of it. Her social life took center stage, and one friend, in particular, became a fixture at our house, a small, energetic blonde named Olivia. Sharp-witted, endlessly cheerful, and about as lovable as a golden retriever. Before I knew it, they were dragging me into their plans. Their favorite? Water skiing. We had a boat, and once summer hit, Saturdays became lake days. Then, one Monday, they pitched something bigger. Can we take the van and spend the whole weekend at the lake? Sophie asked, eyes full of hope. I wasn't exactly drowning in social obligations, so I agreed. That was all they needed. By Thursday, they had everything packed and planned down to the last detail. Friday afternoon, as I was finishing the last bit of loading, a bright red Jeep Cherokee rolled into the driveway. Olivia hopped out first, bouncing with excitement. Then the driver's side door opened, and another figure stepped out, one that looked strikingly familiar. I barely had time to process before Sophie sprinted forward, throwing her arms around her. The next thing I knew, Sophie and Olivia were leading her straight to me. The woman looked nervous but composed. Dad, Sophie said, shifting awkwardly. This is Hannah. She's Olivia's mom. I know you haven't met her yet. Hannah extended her hand, offering a warm but uncertain smile. Hey, Liam. The girls have told me a lot about you. Her voice was light, friendly. Thanks for including me this weekend. Honestly, I was starting to get jealous that they spent so much time with you and not with me. There was something playful in her tone, and in that moment, I understood exactly where Olivia got her energy from. I glanced at Sophie, who gave me a very deliberate look. My stomach did something weird, something unexpected. Then, like an idiot, I glanced at Olivia. She raised an eyebrow, daring me to object. Oh, this was a setup. This will be great, I said, scrambling to collect my thoughts. We always have an amazing time at the lake. Hannah narrowed her eyes slightly, scanning my face. Then she looked at the two grinning teenagers, and realization hit her like a freight train. Her eyes widened. Oh my God, you didn't tell him, did you? Before either of them could answer, she was ambushed, hugs, kisses, rapid-fire pleading. Mom, please don't be mad, Olivia begged. This is going to be so much fun. Hannah, it's fine, Sophie added, way too enthusiastically. Dad's great. He'll love you as much as I do. Hannah finally broke free, holding up both hands. Both of you sit. Now. The girls hesitated. Now. With exaggerated sighs, they obeyed, slinking off to the porch like scolded puppies. Hannah turned to me, exhaling like she was bracing for impact. I swear I had no idea. God, this is awkward. She let out a half-laugh, half-groan. I'm going to grab Olivia, and we'll head out. She's grounded for a month. I cannot believe they did this. She looked so thoroughly embarrassed that, without thinking, I stepped forward and pulled her into a quick hug. She stiffened at first, but after a beat, she relaxed. Yeah, it's awkward, I admitted. They're little troublemakers, but you and I both know they didn't do anything wrong. I studied her face for a second. Let me guess. You're single. Hannah looked up at me and let out a soft, surprised laugh. That's not the problem here. I smirked. I think it is. You packed a bag, cleared your weekend. You're already here. The lake is going to be great. She folded her arms, narrowing her eyes. And you're not a terrible person? I grinned. We could even mess with them a little. Hannah glanced over at the porch, where two overly smug teenagers sat watching us with barely contained excitement. Then, after a pause, she smiled. You know what, she said. Let's do it. I turned and gave the girls a thumbs up. Instantly, they bolted toward us, excited squeals filling the air. Before they could get away with it, I grabbed both of them by the arms. All right, you little masterminds, I said, narrowing my eyes. That was not cool. Olivia, ever the quick thinker, giggled and, in the deepest villainous voice she could muster, said, I'm not nice. That was it. I lost it. Laughter exploded between us, and any hope of scolding them properly vanished. We know what you were trying to do, I told them. You cannot just manipulate people's lives like this. But I love Hannah, Sophie whined. And I didn't know how to introduce you to her. You could have just told me, I pointed out. She looked momentarily guilty. It's okay, kitten, I reassured her. Just don't do it again. Her face brightened instantly. Olivia grabbed my hand, practically bouncing. Can we go now? It's gonna be amazing, Liam. Hannah laughed. That really should be the official definition of cool, Liam. She glanced up at the sky. But she's right, we're losing daylight. And with that, we grabbed her bags, loaded up the last of our gear, and hit the road. The lake was only a half-hour drive, with one quick stop for propane along the way. Hannah sat up front with me while the girls took control of the music, forcing us to endure a playlist so horrendous it felt like a personal attack. As the miles rolled by, I learned a lot about Hannah. She ran her own insurance agency and worked as a financial planner, which explained where Olivia got her sharpness. She was also 3 years younger than me. Not a huge gap, but still something that surprised me. She was small, barely over 5 feet, with light brown hair that tumbled down her back. Her skin had a warm, sun-kissed glow, and her eyes, deep brown, expressive, held both intelligence and humor. She had a kind of effortless elegance about her, like she didn't even realize how naturally graceful she was. And then there was her laugh. Light, genuine, contagious. I caught myself glancing at her more than I probably should have. By the time we pulled into the lake's parking area, one thing was clear. This weekend was going to be interesting. A few miles down the lake, the girls were ready. They peeled off their oversized t-shirts, giggling and shoving each other as they prepped their gear. It was all familiar, comfortable. Then I turned and saw Hannah. And suddenly, nothing was familiar anymore. I had always noticed she was small, petite, but seeing her in a bikini? It made me realize just how tiny she really was. And yet every inch of her was unmistakably feminine. The way her swimsuit hugged her figure made my brain short-circuit. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't trying to be seductive. She was just effortless. Toned, compact, stunning in a way that should have been illegal. Then she turned and caught me looking. And instead of being embarrassed, she smirked and winked. I swallowed hard. I had no business thinking about her this way. None at all. But damn if my brain wasn't betraying me. You know what you look like? I finally managed, forcing my voice to stay casual. Hannah tilted her head, smirking. What, Liam? I shook my head, chuckling. A problem? She laughed, walking over to sit next to me. Close enough to keep an eye on the girls, but also close enough that I was fully aware of her presence. The next few hours were nothing short of chaos, the good kind. The girls tore across the water, showing off their tricks, trying to one-up each other. Hannah, as it turned out, was just as talented. She handled the waves like they were an extension of her, effortlessly controlled, as if she belonged out there. When my turn came, she took the wheel, steering the boat with a level of confidence that only made me like her more. I did okay, nothing fancy, but I held my own. Gravity, however, was not my friend. By the time we pulled back into camp, the sun was slipping below the horizon, and everyone was starving. The girls insisted on doing the cooking, so we fired up the camp stove and grill. I handled the sausages while they worked on the sides, potatoes, onions, and some old-school canned pork and beans. There's something about food cooked outside. It always tastes better. We sat at one of the picnic tables, and within an hour, any awkwardness that had existed between Hannah and me was gone. Somehow, I ended up as Liam. The girls kept steering the conversation back to Hannah not being married, clearly trying to make a point. After a while, I just gave in and asked, Okay, I have to know. I gestured at her. You're smart, gorgeous, hilarious, and you run your own business. How is it that no guy has locked you down yet? Hannah hesitated before sighing. Honestly, Olivia's the reason. I raised an eyebrow. Go on. I was young and naive, she admitted. Thought I'd met the love of my life in college. We had all these plans, graduate, get married, have the perfect life. I caught the shift in her voice. That didn't happen, did it? She shook her head. Not even close. 3 days after I told Trevor I was pregnant, I found out he had been cheating on me for over a month. So, I left and never looked back. I exhaled. His loss. When Sabs was born, I didn't have time for dating, she continued. Then, when I finally got my business running, I was happy. I had her, and she was the best thing that ever happened to me. I didn't need anything else. I nodded. I get that. Sophie's my entire world. She's the only reason I kept it together when everything fell apart. Hannah reached over, placing a small, warm hand on my shoulder. I know, she said softly. She tells Sabs and me everything. I'm so sorry, Liam. Yeah, I muttered. Life has a way of punching you in the gut sometimes. We sighed at the same time. Then we both looked up and saw two very smug teenagers whispering loudly from their chairs. I turned back to Hannah. I love your daughter, I told her honestly. She practically lives with us at this point. Feels like she's almost mine. Hannah smiled, her eyes soft. She loves you too. The other day, she told me, Liam is the dad I never had. Something tightened in my chest. I looked at Hannah, and her deep brown eyes shimmered with unshed tears. Before she could wipe them away, I reached over and brushed one off her cheek with the back of my hand. She's an incredible kid, I murmured. And she has an incredible mom. Hannah smiled, stood up, kissed my cheek lightly, and walked over to join the girls. The weekend was perfect. And when Sunday rolled around, I knew I couldn't just let her leave without saying something. As she was loading up the Jeep, I walked up and knocked on the window. She rolled it down, giving me a knowing look. Liam. I hesitated for half a second, then just went for it. Would you consider going out with me next Friday? Before she could answer, Olivia shrieked from the passenger seat. Hannah laughed, shaking her head. What time? 6, I said. Dinner. Maybe something else. Also, can Sophie stay with Sabs while we're out? Hannah smirked. That's very tempting. She tilted her head. And yes, absolutely. She leaned out, kissed me on the cheek, and pulled away. When I walked inside, Sophie was already waiting, arms crossed. Well, she demanded. Did you ask her out? Did you kiss her? I pulled her into a hug, swatting her playfully. Yes. And none of your business. She squealed, bouncing on the balls of her feet. I knew it. Dad, she's perfect for you. And Sabs is like a sister to me. I chuckled. What happens, happens, Sophie. You can't force these things. She scoffed. Dad, let's be real. You weren't going to do anything unless I pushed you. I couldn't even argue with that. I hugged her tighter. You know you'll always be my number one, right? No matter what. She grinned up at me. I know, Dad. Then, mission accomplished, she skipped off. Our first date went way better than I expected. I took her to play racquetball, and despite never having played before, her tennis skills made her ridiculously good. She was fast, darting around the court like she had Bill and Turbo. Afterward, we sat outside catching our breath. She pulled out her phone. Smile, she said. I barely had time to react before she snapped a picture. Seconds later, the girl's text started rolling in. We had officially made a memory. That night, I took her to a small, quiet Italian restaurant. The kind of place that felt warm, intimate. We ate too much, lingered over wine, and talked for hours. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about the past. I was looking forward. Hannah sat beside me in the booth, her body naturally leaning into mine. Without a second thought, I draped an arm around her shoulders. She didn't hesitate, just melted into me, looking up with a soft smile. It was effortless. It was natural. And in that moment, I realized something. She was always going to be like this. Warm, lighthearted, the kind of person who could brighten a room without even trying. And maybe, just maybe, this was exactly what I'd been needing all along. That wasn't something time would take away. When I pulled into her driveway later that night, she turned toward me, her eyes flicking briefly to my lips before locking onto mine again. She wanted me to kiss her. I wanted it even more. I leaned in, brushing my lips against hers. She tasted like red wine and cherry chapstick. The kiss was slow, deep, impossibly sweet, like something neither of us wanted to end. When we finally pulled apart, movement in the window caught my attention. I think we have an audience, I murmured. Hannah giggled, a sound eerily similar to Olivia's. Or maybe Olivia had inherited it from her. I'd be surprised if we didn't, she admitted. You do realize they've been orchestrating this whole thing, right? I raised an eyebrow. And you don't mind? Her cheeks flushed slightly. No, she said, smiling. And you? I shook my head. Not even a little. She grinned. We should probably get inside before they tear down the curtains. For the next 4 months, Friday nights became our thing. Sometimes we went out for dinner. Other times we tried something adventurous, hiking, mini-golf, or just long walks where we talked about everything and nothing. We never rushed anything, but every week, the connection between us grew stronger. There were moments, charged, lingering moments, where I could tell she wanted more. God knows I did too. But I realized something important. I loved being with her, not just as her boyfriend, but as her friend. We talked constantly. She'd text me ridiculous jokes throughout the day, and I'd send her things I knew would make her laugh. She was the first person I thought of when something funny happened, and the only person I wanted to talk to when things weren't great. Tuesday nights became family dinners, the four of us, me, Hannah, Sophie, and Olivia, cooking together, playing games, just being. I wasn't just falling for Hannah. I was falling for her daughter too. They were so alike that knowing one felt like knowing the other, yet they had their own incredible differences. Life was good. The only thing that cast a shadow over it was Isabel. She was still part of Sophie's life, which meant she still lurked at the edges of mine. Every time I saw her, irritation flickered to life. She was a reminder of a chapter one had closed, yet somehow couldn't quite escape. She tried to force small talk whenever she picked up Sophie or when I dropped her off at her grandparents' house. She was still living with them, having lost her job at the clinic. Now, she was working at a private practice across town. Whenever she pushed too hard, I'd casually ask if she'd heard from Marcus. That always shut her up. One afternoon, she cornered me in the driveway. "How long is it going to take for you to forgive me?" she asked, her voice tight. I stared at her. "Forgive you for what, exactly?" She flinched. "As far as I can tell, you don't even think you did anything wrong." Silence. I folded my arms. "Not once have I heard you say, 'I'm sorry, Liam. I was wrong. I'm sorry I tried to make Sophie believe you were lying. I'm sorry I tried to take her away from you. I'm sorry I dragged you through a brutal divorce when I was the one who destroyed our marriage." I took a step closer. "And most of all, not once have you ever said, 'I'm sorry I cheated on you and slept with that loser behind your back.'" Isabel's face paled. I shook my head. "You still can't own your mistakes. So I don't even know what forgiveness would mean." The truth was, I had let it go. I didn't dwell on it anymore. I refused to waste my time mourning something that had already burned to the ground. People make bad choices. They have the right to leave, to fall out of love, to screw up their lives. But that didn't mean I had to carry the weight of it. For a moment, I'd wanted revenge. I wanted them both to feel humiliated, to suffer the consequences of their choices. But I moved past that quickly. Their punishment was simple. They had to live with themselves. Isabel was miserable. Marcus was long gone. And as much as I'd wished for karma to hit them like a freight train, I realized I didn't need to do anything. Life had already handled it for me. She took it even harder when she found out about Hannah. One night, after I dropped Sophie off at her grandparents' house, Isabel blocked my path before I could get into my car. "I heard you're dating one of Sophie's friends' moms." Her arms were crossed, her tone clipped. I didn't say anything. "Is it true?" she pressed. I shrugged. "Not your business." Her jaw tightened. "Damn it, Liam. I have a right to know." I let out a sharp laugh. "No, you don't. You lost that right when you found your soulmate, remember? And guess what? It wasn't me." Her face twisted in frustration. "Then something happened," I continued. "It's called a divorce. My life is mine now. So do us both a favor, Isabel, stay out of it." I walked away, feeling lighter than I had in years. When I told Sophie about it, she was furious. From that moment on, she refused to let Isabel drop her off at our house. Instead, her grandparents picked her up and brought her home. Isabel's presence in my life faded to almost nothing. And that was exactly how I wanted it. 7 months after that first trip to the lake, I planned something special. Dinner at a nice restaurant, followed by a club. Hannah wasn't a big drinker, maybe a beer now and then, but that night, she ordered a second cocktail. I raised an eyebrow. "Yes, Liam," she teased. "I'm wild and reckless tonight." I smirked. "You're perfect as always." She tilted her head, that same cute little habit she had. I didn't know where things would go from here. But for once, I wasn't looking back. I was moving forward. And this time, I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be. "Of course I do," I murmured, my fingers tracing slow circles on the back of her hand. Hannah's smile lingered. Then her expression shifted, more serious. "Then tell me something. Anything. If I'm so perfect, why haven't you invited me to stay the night?" I actually choked, on my drink. She laughed, eyes glinting with amusement. "You haven't even thought about it." I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to cooperate. "Hannah, I haven't thought about anything else since that first day on the boat." I exhaled. "Since I saw you in that damn bikini." She grinned. "Good." I ran a hand through my hair. I didn't want to push, didn't want to rush anything. Her voice softened. "You won't scare me away." That's when she leaned in and whispered. "I told the girls not to wait up for me." My pulse jumped. "Really?" Hannah reached for my hand, squeezing it lightly. "So," she said with a teasing smile, "why are we still sitting here? I didn't need any more convincing. I stood, pulling her up with me, and we walked out together, fingers intertwined. That night, as we drove home, she rested her head against my shoulder, her hand still locked with mine. The air between us felt alive, humming with anticipation. When we reached my house, I got out first, walking around to open her door. She stepped out, her body brushing against mine as we made our way inside. Every glance, every small touch sent sparks across my skin. By the time we reached the bedroom, I turned her toward me, cupping her face. I kissed her, slow, deep, the kind of kiss that unraveled time. Her fingers curled into my hair, pulling me closer, as if she wanted to lose herself in the moment. When we finally pulled apart, her brown eyes held mine, full of emotion. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Make love to me, Liam." Then, almost shyly, she admitted, "I'm a little nervous." I brushed a thumb over her cheek, my voice steady and warm. "There's nothing to be afraid of." I paused, then added, "I love you, Hannah Barnes. You know that, right?" She exhaled softly, like she'd been holding in that breath for far too long. "I thought so," she murmured, but I needed to hear it. So I said it again. "I love you." Her fingers tightened in my hair. "I love you too, Liam." My hands moved slowly, deliberately, tracing the zipper of her dress before I slid it down, my knuckles grazing the delicate skin of her back. She shivered beneath my touch, goosebumps rising in the wake of my fingers. The dress slipped from her shoulders, cascading to the floor. She stood before me in nothing but delicate blue lace, so breathtaking I forgot how to breathe. I reached for her, pulling her into my lap, my cheek pressed against the smooth plane of her stomach, my hands resting at the curve of her hips. That was when my restraint snapped. The night unfolded in pieces, soft whispers, tangled sheets, a rhythm that neither of us wanted to break. She was fire, untamed and alive, meeting me with everything she had. And when it was over, when we lay wrapped in each other, I kissed her forehead, her temple, her lips, murmuring words neither of us fully understood. Sleep came, but only in fragments. Twice more, we found each other again, once at my insistence, once at hers. When morning arrived, she was sprawled across me, her cheek against my chest, her hair spilling over both of us like a golden veil. I ran my fingers through the soft strands, watching as she stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, still hazy with sleep. She stretched, pressing herself closer with a contented sigh. "My place is here, Liam," she murmured. I smiled. "I know." She blinked up at me, half awake. "Wait, do you mean like living together?" I smirked. "No, honey." Then I paused. "Well, yes, but what I really mean is..." I swallowed, heart hammering, and met her eyes. "Will you marry me, Hannah Barnes?" Her breath hitched. Then she lifted her left hand between us, wiggling her fingers. "Nope," she teased. "Something's missing." I chuckled. "Hold that thought." She giggled, but then groaned, burying her face in my chest. "I can hold a thought, but I really need to pee." Laughing, I gave her a light smack on the bare curve of her hip, making her yelp. "Go then. Meet me back here." She darted out of the room, disappearing down the hallway. I made a quick detour to my office, stopping by the safe. Inside was what I'd been holding on to for the right moment. When I returned, she was curled up beneath the blankets, waiting. I climbed in beside her, took her hand, and looked into those deep brown eyes. "Hannah," I said softly, "will you marry me?" Then, sliding the ring onto her finger, I watched as her expression shifted, from surprise, to awe, to something deeper. She held up her hand, turning the ring under the light. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Then her brows furrowed slightly. "It looks old. Where did you get this?" I smiled. "Remember when I told you I was going to that auction last month?" She nodded. "Yeah, the estate sale." "Well," I continued, watching her reaction, "what I didn't tell you was that I went there specifically for this ring." I paused. "And to ask you this question." Her breath caught. "This was made in England sometime around 1810, I explained. "It once belonged to the Duchess of Avon." Her fingers brushed over the intricate setting, her eyes wide with wonder. "Liam," she whispered, "this is the most beautiful ring I've ever seen." I chuckled. "That's great and all, but you still haven't answered my question." Her gaze snapped up to meet mine. Then it clicked. "Oh," she gasped, laughing. "Yes. Yes, Liam, I'll marry you." Grinning, I pulled her into my arms and kissed her deeply. Then she suddenly stiffened, pulling back just enough to look at me. We need to tell the girls. I groaned, dropping my head onto her shoulder. Can we please enjoy this for 5 minutes before they start planning the wedding? She laughed, pressing a kiss to my forehead. Liam, you know they already have it planned. I sighed dramatically. You're right. She smirked. Of course I am. With one last kiss, she reached for her phone. And just like that, the next chapter of our lives began.